Would councilors take their seat, please?
Somebody, hey, unbelievable. How are you?
Before I resume this hearing, I just want to apologize. It was scheduled for 1:30, and there was another hearing that was scheduled after, and we got through about 1:15. So this is the earliest I could, so people could have a bite to eat and a bathroom break. So here I am. So I welcome all of you to this hearing today for Rachel Hershfang. My name is Marilyn Petito Deviani, and I will be presiding. And I first want to ask everyone, especially the counselors, to put away their cell phones. And also, if you are planning to speak, would you please stand for the pledge? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. So I would like to introduce the councilors who are present. Councilor Ferrera,
Good afternoon.
Councilor Juvenville,
Good afternoon.
Councilor Kennedy,
Good afternoon.
and Councilor Duff. And would you like to introduce the people who are here?
I
You.
would. Thank you, Counselor Devaney. I have brought with me today my parents, Ann and Herb Hershfang. We're over in the corner seated with my husband, Wes Williams. And I have the honor to be joined by Chief Justice Green of the Appeals Court, Justice Amy Blake, my colleague Eric Worney, my friend Dan Ty, and my friend Alexandra Firth.
Right.
That was Judge Hirsch.
I am so
Not to
pleased.
me.
I'm pleased that you brought judges that I have voted for. That makes it nice. And very proud to do so, I want to tell you. Very proud of the people on the appeals court and your boss over here. Great. So I want to start with the
Marilyn.
first witness, and that's Justice Amy Blake, and you could sit beside the nominee.
Thank you.
How nice to see you again.
It's wonderful to see you, although
Is this the first time since both of you?
testifying, I think testifying, I'm having flashbacks, but I'm okay.
All right.
Don't worry.
Okay.
I did
great
it
to see you.
twice. I'm not going for number 3.
Okay, great to see you.
Nice to see all of you as well. Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of Rachel Hershfang in support of her nomination to be an Associate Justice of the Appeals Court. I met Rachel in the summer of 2015 when she invited me to join the Board of Editors of the Boston Bar Journal. Rachel was chair at the time and had a lot of energy, and I knew this is a woman I wanted to get to know. Ironically, I am now the incoming chair of this board, and I know the gigantic shoes that Rachel has left for me to fill, and I'm sure I will not be able to. But like I said, I knew right away there was something really special about Rachel. She has amazing energy, leadership qualities, and a work ethic that were readily apparent at these monthly meetings. I watched her lead a group of volunteer lawyers and judges, including my chief, who had more than an A-type personality. So not to say that they were difficult, but everyone has an opinion on this board. And I was so struck by Rachel's ability to find consensus, to listen, and to engage with board members. She knew what she knew, and from my perspective, most importantly, she knew what she didn't know. And I think this is a really important trait for an appeals court judge. When I joined the appeals court almost 7 years ago, as you all know, I came from the probate and family court. I think I knew what I was doing with respect to those issues, but I really had to hit the books. I had to study. I had to learn about drug cases because I knew Councilors Jubenville and Councilors Kennedy were going to keep me on my toes on those motions to suppress. I didn't know anything about med mal or landlord tenant. I can't tell you how many times I was in my chief's office with some zoning question. I'm still in my chief's office with my zoning questions. In Rachel's capacity as the chair of the board, I realized that what I was doing as a judge was exactly what Rachel was doing as chair. We publish a quarterly publication that has every issue under the sun that you can imagine that affects lawyers and non-lawyers. Rachel was the chair. She didn't know every issue, but she asked good questions. She put the time in and she worked so hard to make every journal issue the best it could be. And when I thought about the fact that Rachel was nominated to the appeals court, I looked back, believe it or not, I'm now 7th in seniority at the appeals court, which is pretty scary. And I looked back and thought about who has come since my time. And there's such a mix of people, right? We have defense attorneys, we have prosecutors, we have lawyers from big firms, we have people who worked for the AG's office or for different divisions within the state. It really is a melting pot. And every time a new judge joins, there's a learning curve, and it's a huge learning curve. And the humility that Rachel has shown in my conversations with her as a friend about what it's going to take to be ready to go on day one shows me that she gets it. She knows there's a big learning curve, and I have no question whatsoever that she will put the time in. I know that Rachel's resume is super impressive, and it certainly speaks to her work in the federal system, but I want to allay any concern that anyone might have that what she's done for her career readily translates to what we do in the appeals court. And I say that because whether it's in federal court, state court, another state court even, we have to decide, should the evidence have come in? Was it admissible? Did the judge instruct the jury properly? That's black letter law. That's in the books. You can learn it if you don't know it. I'd like to think I've at least learned some of it in my 7 years. And also, we've had judges join our court with no trial experience. We've had professors join our court. We've had people with no criminal experience like me. And the first case I had was a murder case. And I thought, I can't do this. I'm a divorce attorney. And my colleague turned to me and said, Amy, it's an assault and battery where someone died. Get over it. And he was right. And I put the time in and I figured it out. I have no doubt that Rachel will do the exact same thing. I also think about two people that I know, at least Counselor Devaney knows, which is Gary Katzman, who was in the federal system before he joined us and who I had the great pleasure of sitting with, who's now sitting back on the federal bench, which is so impressive.
Amazing.
And of course, the one and only Justice Dalila Wentland, who joined the appeals court and is killing it in the SJC. I'd like to think it's because Chief Justice Green and I were such great influences. But those people came from the federal system and they hit the ground running. The last thing I want to say is that the law is important. There's no question. But to me, the most important thing about an appeals court judge is how collegial they are. Some say it's how well do you play in the sandbox with others. Well, I can tell you, Rachel has no problem. She's an active listener. She builds consensus. She agrees to disagree and does so in such a nice way that you're not even sure that she disagrees with you anymore. And I know that she will take this job on with dignity and grace. And I really urge you to confirm her nomination. And I am happy to answer any questions that the council may have and to thank you again for letting me speak on behalf of
Okay.
my friend.
Any questions from the council?
I do.
Counselor Jubal?
Of course, you're such a good judge. You know what you don't know and you ask about it, right?
Absolutely.
And there are judges who don't do that. And then they get themselves in a whatever because they don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
So I applaud you for that. That's
Thank you.
a sign of somebody who would
Thank you.
do my vote good thing.
It was excellent, I must say.
I agree.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you. I just want to say that I want to make a disclosure that I didn't vote for you because our husbands were firefighters.
Oh,
Okay?
don't tell Richie that.
But no, you're my star. It was such a pleasure to see you on the bench. And how you speak is what you are. I mean, you're so genuine and that you don't know everything and that you learn. And I would hope that any judge, before they take the bench, that they would find out and what they didn't know and to learn. And I do want to say about Judge Green, I think I voted 3 times. Did I 3 times? Okay, now I want to tell you what an addition to the appeals court to have someone from land court, the first. So, I mean, to have that information that you don't know and you have no idea, I think it's wonderful. So I can't say enough about it. And I'm proud to say the people who are serving now, I have voted for every one of them because I really believe in them. And I'm so proud of our appeals court and proud of you.
Thank you.
And so believe me, your testimony means so much. So thank you
appreciate
for
that.
coming.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Counselor Devaney.
So your next witness
I
is
was worried Counselor Kennedy would have a question.
Eric. Oh,
I'm saving them.
I'm sorry.
Don't
I'm sorry. Did you? I didn't see a hand. I'm sorry. So our next is Eric Worney.
Nice to meet you.
Did I pronounce it right?
That's a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best. So thank you for having me. I'm very proud to be here on Rachel's behalf. I couldn't be prouder for her nomination. It's well deserved. Rachel and I met for the first time in 2008.
Do you want to come closer to
Sure.
the mic?
Yep.
Maybe you can pull that.
So Rachel and I met for the first time in 2008. I'm an attorney at the Securities and Exchange Commission. At the time, I think I was all of 26 and didn't know anything about the law, maybe even about life at the time. And I think they knew that, so they assigned Rachel to many of my cases because I really needed help and I needed a mentor. And she served that role in a way that I still am very thankful of to this day. And she did it in a way that taught me many things that I hope I still practice today, which is being fair and being honest and having integrity in everything you do. Rachel is brilliant. She has opinions, which is great, but she's not afraid to say if she's wrong or to do the right thing. And that's the one thing I've learned. I've tried to do every time I practice a case or work on a case. And it's certainly something I've taken away from her in particular. And I think she knows this. Maybe that's why she asked me to come today. I view her as the primary mentor of my career. And what is one example just of how Rachel operates and how she's great to work with is when I started, again, I didn't really know much, but I had a particular way of wanting to do certain things, and I would research it and I would approach things with a particular way and I would recommend it to those up the chain. They didn't always agree with me, and Rachel didn't have to either, but I would explain it to her and she would have my back and she would go up the chain to the managers as well, and she would support my view if it's a view she thought made sense. And even if it was a view she didn't necessarily agree with, she thought it was exercising good judgment, she would support it. And I've seen her do that many times. And there's one case in particular I'll always think of, and I thank her for that. I think resulted in a fantastic result that probably would not have been accomplished if Rachel didn't have my back. And she's continued to have my back to this day. One of the things that you just heard, which I can echo from my role working with Rachel as a colleague, is as brilliant as she is, as excellent of a lawyer as she is, she's willing to listen. That's her number one positive trait, in my opinion. She will sit down and talk to you and listen to you, and she will do it for hours on end. I've probably chewed her ear off for hours on end on many occasions. Often she'll eat grapefruit when you're talking to her, but nonetheless, she will still listen to you. And two things that are great about that. One is she's not afraid, as you just heard, to say if she's wrong or to say she doesn't know something. She will listen, even if she has an opinion going in. Second, she will have her mind change. She can be persuaded if she hears different facts or she hears different things than she expected when the conversation started. I think whether it's a judge on the federal level or on the state level, that has to be one of the most important, if not the most important traits of any judge, being fair and willing to listen and to be persuaded. The other thing I'll note about Rachel is she is honest. Everything she has said from day one to me is honest. She's very transparent. It's often funny, but it's what makes her a great colleague in the office. But it's, I think, another significant trait a judge should have is just being candid and transparent and honest with any of the litigants in the courtroom and with how they approach the job. And so, as far as I'm concerned, you couldn't have nominated a better candidate and someone who'd be really perfect for the job. The way I'll leave it is what folks were talking about at the end. It's obvious from Rachel's resume, as impressive as it is, that she has most of her experience on the federal level. But when she came to the SEC, she spent years doing a variety of work at a law firm, but she was primarily a drug prosecutor, the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I'm sure Rachel will probably say the securities laws are very different than the drug laws. And, she could have come in, she had a very big reputation. She had a very successful career. She was the deputy chief of the drug unit. She could have come in and said, I'm Rachel Hershfang, here's how we do things. She was so humble. She was willing to learn. She was willing to say what she didn't know about the securities laws. And she's a star in the office. She's been incredibly effective. She's done a number of successful trials. People go to her now for advice on the securities laws. And it's a testament to her willing to say what she doesn't know and to learn. And so again, it has to be one of the better traits of any candidate you can nominate. So happy to take any questions, but I'm very happy to be seeing.
That's great. Councilor Juvenville.
Are you the fellow that handled the Madoff case?
I'm not. I'm not.
Just kidding. That was a very well said talk on.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
How do you say your last?
Worney, Forni, Worney,
Forni?
Ni. Yep,
Is that Italian?
it is Italian. Yeah,
Terrible. Okay, now.
What part of Italy are they from?
all over. So my great grandparents came over, and they're from anywhere from Sicily, which my father would joke.
My father was.
My father would joke
Sicily.
I'm a third Sicilian and 2/3 Italian.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well,
and
but my Danucci side, my mother's side, they're from Avellino
yeah,
near Naples.
Naples.
So, and I'm embarrassed that I mispronounced your name. So it's Worney. That's pretty.
Thank you.
So I'll tell you, testimony means a lot to me because I've been here 21 years and I've seen people sitting in that chair. And I'll say, what do you know about this night? Oh, I saw her once in court. Great, but you really know. And that means a lot to the council to know what you know about this nominee and why you're here to recommend her. So I thank you for your time and coming here.
Thanks for having me.
So, you have a question?
No, I
Councilor Kennedy.
just a comment. I thought it was interesting. Everybody thought your testimony meant a lot and they didn't say anything about Judge Blake's. I'm just, I just thought it was interesting.
Our next nominee is Daniel Ty. And I think I pronounced that.
Yes.
I can pronounce the Irish names.
Well, I do have a few extra letters just to keep you on your toes.
Welcome.
Councilors, thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Daniel Ty, Tighe. I'm a partner at a Boston firm called Donnelly, Conroy, and Gelhar. We're a civil litigation shop. And I've practiced in Massachusetts and Boston for a little bit over 30 years, civil litigation. I do both state cases and federal cases. And in the course of my career, I've represented various individuals that find themselves in the crosshairs of the Securities and Exchange Commission. And on 3 occasions, Rachel Hershfang was lead counsel for the SEC. So I'm delighted to speak about my experience with her and to just say overall how thrilled I am that she is nominated and how wholeheartedly I hope that her nomination is confirmed. I first met Ms. Hershfang in 2009. I was representing an individual who was charged civilly with an insider trading violation of the securities laws. It was a matter that ended up going to trial in federal court in 2009. Several years later, our paths crossed again, a totally different case involving some statements that were made by officers of some officers of a biotech firm about the FDA drug approval process. And then also I've been involved in some cases that involved accounting principles. So we have never been on the same side of a case. We've always been adversaries. And I will say that in my 30 years, Rachel is really one of the finest lawyers that I've ever had the privilege to work with. Her legal analysis, her legal writing, her advocacy, her judgment are just top flight in every way. She's tough, to be sure. As my predecessor witnesses have said, she has her opinions, and they're strongly felt opinions, but she will listen. And on many occasions, I've called her up and said, Rachel, can we just talk about this? And she listens. She'll consider the defense perspective. And she always made it clear to me that she understands that SEC decisions involve a human being on the other side of that decision. So with that said, I'd just like to focus for 2 minutes on perhaps some issues that the counselors might be specifically interested in, and that is her transition from the federal system to the state court bench, which Judge Blake and Eric have already talked about, but also just her demeanor. And the short version of my thoughts on both issues is that there's no doubt she would just make a great judge. All the cases that I've been involved with Rachel involved the federal securities laws, but they have nothing else in common. One case involved the inner workings of a really big mutual fund company. One involved the FDA drug approval process, statistics, and one involved accounting. And in all 3 cases, which are really had nothing, again, nothing to do with one another. Rachel became an expert in the facts, in the law, and the cast of characters, and the witnesses, the defense lawyers, the specific rules in play. I saw her work very closely with her really talented team, including Mr. Forney. I just believe that whatever comes across her desk in the appeals court, she'll dedicate the same amount of intellectual firepower, work ethic, and there's just no question in my mind that she'd become a master of that subject matter as well, and also rely on her colleagues, as I saw her rely on her colleagues in my cases. As it relates to just the personal touch, I'll just say that the first time that I met Rachel was shortly before this case was about to go to trial in 2009. And it came at a very difficult, or I should say busy time for me, not difficult, but, and I, right before the federal trial was supposed to start, I was in the middle of a 3-week jury trial in Middlesex County. And so while that case was going on, I came back to my office one night and called Ms. Hershfang about some pretrial matter. And I really didn't know her. She owed me no favors. We had no experience. This was the first time we'd ever worked together. And she said, why don't we ask Judge Zobel to put over our trial for a couple of weeks and let you catch your breath? There was zero tactical benefit to her. It helped me a lot. It didn't help the Securities and Exchange Commission. And it was the kind of thing, moving a trial at that late date, I was afraid to even ask about, because there were witnesses coming from all over. It just meant the world to me. I know an extension's a small thing, but that was her idea, that we jointly asked the judge to put over the trial just for a couple of weeks. And I will say it made all the difference in the world. And I think it speaks volumes about the kind of person, the fairness with which she approaches each case. I will also say about that trial, as you all know, those can be emotionally charged atmospheres, and sometimes lawyers have a tendency to demonize one another. There are harsh words, and there was never any of that. We killed the time talking about our families, other cases, the curious cast of characters in our case. And I must say it was a pleasure. As for the trial itself, she was an absolute star of the courtroom. I trembled every time she mentioned my client's name to the jury. She just commanded every aspect of the case. We were fortunate and we prevailed, and she could not have been any more gracious. It was obviously Rachel doesn't lose many cases. And she congratulated me in a very genuine way. She wished my client and his wife well. And then it was on to the next case, just like it should be. Just to close out, I'll say, I'm delighted again that she has been nominated. I really do hope she's confirmed. I think we'll all be better off if she is on the bench. I'm certain she won't agree with everything that I would, with the way I would rule, but I think she'll be an excellent judge. And with that, I just
Thank you
offer
for your
to
testimony. I have to say, your witnesses are, they know you, and, it's very obvious for the years that they've known the respect they have for you. And that means a lot to us, to know that the witness is just not coming to, keep the seat warm. So, councilors, any questions? Councilor Juvenile.
Question, but I really thank you for that.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Counselor.
A nice little take. Both of the witnesses have today, so that's great.
Thank you, Counsel.
Thank you.
We've completed the witnesses, but it was a sin of remission that I didn't mention to Judge Blake when she was testifying. You mentioned Judge Katzman. I have to tell a story. I had the honor of presiding over Judge Katzman. And when we came into the chamber, I saw him come in. I sat him down and I said, look, well, this is what we'll do, blah, blah. It was his twin brother. It was I was advising his twin brother. I had him sitting there, and you can't believe exactly. And anyone that knows him, and I have to say, the comb over, everything, okay? So in comes Judge Katzman, and I'm saying, oh my God. I met with him for hours. He never told me he had an identical twin brother. And they have this, they're both judges. His brother, believe it or not, is a judge in New York, and wonderful, had the same personality. So, I had to tell that story. He's just a wonderful person. So he invited me over to the courthouse when he was sworn in. And anyway, the first person he recognized was me, and I said, oh my God. And he says, I want to thank Counselor Devaney for the Belgian waffle. Everyone looked at me like, did she bring him to her house and make him a belt? It was embarrassing. Okay. But you all know we go to the diner. But I'll tell you, I was sorry to hear him leave, but so deserved, So I had to put that in the record. That was the fun. It was funny. And and Judge Katzman's brother was so gracious. I mean, I had to tell him to get out of the chair, But it was an experience that I'll remember always. It was funny. So now that we've gone through the witnesses, is there anyone in opposition? All right, hearing none. Now it's your turn for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Counselor
You're
Devaney.
welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for considering me for this incredible honor. I know of no higher calling than to serve the citizens of this Commonwealth as an Associate Justice on the Appeals Court. Thank you to each member of this council for giving me the opportunity to answer your questions. Thank you to Governor Baker and to Lieutenant Governor Polito for nominating me for this position. Thank you to my witnesses and guests for your presence and words here today. And I also want to acknowledge the professionalism and service of Bob Ross and Lauren Green Petrino, as well as the members of the Judicial Nominating Commission. My thanks to all of them and all of you. I would not be here if it were not for my parents, Anne and Herbert Hershfang. They have lived their commitment to public service, to community, equity, and social justice. Some of you know my father, who served for 16 years as an Associate Justice on the Boston Municipal Court. His was a busy court, yet he approached every litigant with kindness and compassion, understanding deeply the meaning of having your day in court. In my 26 years in practice here, countless lawyers have recalled my father's patience when they were new lawyers. He was and remains a teacher. Public service found my mother. My parents had recently moved to the South End to an abandoned house they had bought at public auction. The neighborhood was seen as expendable, the kind of place you'd run an interstate through. Plans put I-95 at the end of our block. Galvanized, my mother became a protester and an organizer. They changed the plan, and a state transportation career was born. She was the first woman ever on the Massport board. She went on to serve the Commonwealth as Undersecretary of Transportation and then on the Turnpike Authority Board. When you drive on the Pike and see the beautiful colors on the underside of the overpass bridges, that's her doing. Outsiders considered the South End a dangerous neighborhood, and it had its challenges, but it was a close-knit place where neighbors looked out for neighbors, where the whole block turned out to chase a mugger when someone yelled for help. The South End of today, the fine dining and the arts scene, that all came later. My South End was neighbors coming together to solve local problems. It was a rich and diverse place to live. I lived in that house until last summer. Like me, my daughters went to the Boston Public School in our neighborhood. Eleanor, my older daughter, was named for her grandmother who came here from Hungary as a teenager. If my Ellie was here today, she would probably tell you that she is fully capable of serving as a justice on the appeals court and that mommy probably doesn't know what she's doing. She is 10, going on 14, sassy, and knows that girls can do anything. Claire, my younger daughter, is kind and funny. She will turn 8 next week and she plans to be president. My experience, both personal and professional, has prepared me to serve as an associate justice on the appeals court. I am passionate about the law, committed to good writing, experienced in civil and criminal practice. For over 20 years, I have dedicated my legal career to serving the public. I work well with others and am skilled at reaching consensus. These are the qualities of an appeals court justice. I started my legal career clerking in a trial court for a wonderful judge. Reginald Lindsay was thoughtful and compassionate, smart and kind. He worked hard and expected us to work hard to reach the right result in every case. His lessons extended outside the law. As a Black man who used a wheelchair, he was no stranger to prejudice. Through his eyes, I learned to look critically at accessibility in public and private spaces. He passed away in 2008, a great loss to the legal community and to me. That job and the next at a firm taught me that good legal writing is clear writing, stripped of jargon and technical terms. For 6 months, I served as a special ADA in Cambridge District Court. Patient colleagues taught me the ropes, including how to take one for the team, which happens daily in district court. The responsibility was humbling: to assess an alleged crime, speak with defense counsel and victims, consult with colleagues, and together come up with a fair and just resolution. I loved it and was inspired to become a full-time courtroom lawyer. At the U.S. Attorney's Office, I learned criminal law and procedure. I tried complex cases, did my own appeals, and served as a supervisor in the busy drug unit. In that role, I participated in the CARE program, Court-Assisted Recovery Effort, a re-entry program that helped defendants move past their substance use disorders and re-enter the world. After almost 8 years ready for a new challenge, I took a trial position at the SEC. I was never a securities lawyer. Those laws are complex and sometimes obscure. Again, I applied myself to learning and to teaching others what I knew, how to prepare and try a case. Trial practice is a team practice, and that's one of the things I love about it. The best decisions come from people testing their ideas against other people's ideas. 13 years in, I have earned the respect and appreciation of colleagues who come to me for help with strategy, difficult witnesses, or complex legal issues. One last thanks. My husband, Wes Williams, and I celebrated our 13th wedding anniversary last week. Any successes in my last 13 years are because of his support and partnership. When I am crazy at work, he keeps our home running, dealing with 2 young kids, the logistics, the groceries, the laundry. I am so lucky and grateful to have found him, and I would not be here without his love and encouragement. Thank you all. I'm excited and humbled to be here today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much. Counselor Duff.
Thank you for applying. I love talking. Me, I know there is no one size fits all. Sorry, that's the beauty of this court, of this particular court, as I was speaking to the Chief Justice earlier about it, is that you meet on panels. And so if there's a subject that maybe is not your strong suit, there are other judges that you're consulting with. And it's as Justice Green said, 3 heads are better than one. And it's a beautiful thing about our appeals court system. And but your unique background, with you remind me of Justice Wildland. I mangle the poor woman's name every time, but we don't get many folks with this type of background of white collar crime and intellectual property. And we talked about an internet case that you had done. It's very, very different. Your education, I don't know who told you to go to these schools, your parents, but this is a stunningly beautiful education. So I hate to say it, I don't really have a lot of questions. I really enjoyed talking to you. I think you're going to bring a whole new complement what we already have on that court working with these boards. I do want to say publicly, and I said it to you privately, So folks, because I know folks are watching this, for people to understand, and as somebody who worked in the technology industry in California and then at the FCC in Washington, somebody with your intellect, your education, your law school, and your background could be literally pulling in over $1 million a year in private practice.
Don't tell
Between
my
prac-
husband. Don't tell my husband.
Sorry. Between practice and options and everything else, I mean, it's the fact that you have volunteered to serve the Commonwealth at what frankly is a starting salary for somebody coming out of Yale Law School. Our judges really, they're paid better than what they were, but it's not what you could be getting. So I want to acknowledge that, and I thank you for it, because this is one of the challenges we talk about all the time is getting the quality people we want to apply. Because there's so many other things they could be doing. You've got little kids, you could be making a lot of money for those kids. So thank you for your dedication and your sacrifice to step up for the Commonwealth. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Kennedy.
Thank you. I'm going to put in a plug for the judges' pay raise as well. I think they're grossly underpaid. And I know that there's some proposed legislation coming up to help address that a little bit. The numbers I hear aren't particularly high, but it'll help. I received calls from a number of people about you. Probably one coming in right now. Justice Wedland called me. She is great. Don't tell her I said that because my friend and classmate, Bob Peabody, called me. Very good friend of mine for many decades. I didn't get the connection here, but Tejal Mehta called me, Judge Mehta. Told me to be nice to her friend. I said no. And of course, Judge Blake, as soon as you got nominated, texted me instantly, and I got scolded for not texting back right away this morning. But, and you reminded me, we had a trial together?
Probably.
Yeah?
I think we saw each other a lot in Cambridge District
Yeah,
Court.
it was
I
a
don't
long time
remember.
ago, but
You would have beaten me, but
I doubt it. I doubt it. I did appear in front of your father quite a bit. He doesn't remember me. I was just a kid then, so I didn't, but I do remember him, and I remember how nice he was to me as a young lawyer. And he was a teacher. You won't have the opportunity to be much of a teacher because most of the young lawyers don't go to the appeals court right away, unfortunately. One of the things about the appeals court is Councilor Duff pointed out, is you need a diversity of background because they handle so many different types of cases. I don't know that they'd be handling SEC cases, but certainly a lot of the things that touch the SEC, they would be involved with, many corporate disputes, things of that nature. And I think that's a hole they have there that I think you could fill.
oh, thank you.
And fill very, very well. We had a long talk on the phone. It was nice to hear from you again after all these years. It was back in the 1990s that we interacted. I think you're going to be a great judge. I think your mother and father should be extremely proud of you, as I'm sure they are. I see the glowing over there. Under the mask, if they smile any harder, they're going to rip. But I'm going to vote for you next.
Thank you so much, Counselor Kennedy.
Thank you. Counselor Juvendale. Hello, Counselor Juvendale.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I have a little peeve with the application. Not so much yours, but with a lot of the application. Because people don't seem to answer the question that's asked in the application. They use not applicable. You used it a lot. And I'll give you an example. It says, have you ever served as a master or arbitrator? You put not applicable.
Sorry, I have not.
That was yes or no?
So I know there's something in the instructions that if you don't think it's applicable, you can put not applicable, but I don't like that because what you think is not applicable may be applicable to some counselors thinking about something. So I'm just going to scold you for that.
Scold.
Won't take any points off the board,
Thank you.
okay? I got a call from Maureen Hogan, who I told you called me and demanded, I'll say demanded, it could have been even more than that, but I'll take it as a demand.
I'm gonna interrupt you. She called me as well. I forgot her.
Continue,
So,
Counsel.
You don't want the judge mad at us? We tell you.
No, we don't.
So let me just ask you a couple of things, and it's more not so much what you're going to do. You're eminently qualified, in my view.
Thank you.
In fact, the only person in the room I think is more qualified than you is your father. Okay, he was a wonderful judge, and I was before him in those years. A lot of activity took place in that BMC. Every feeder court in the city sent cases in. You go into a main session where there would be probably 20, 30 lawyers. There would be 40, 50 people waiting to get sent out to sessions. Of course, you always asked the clerk or court of who's in this session, who's in that session, and then try to get the clerk to send you to the session. But myself and others used to, who's the lineup today? Oh, yeah, send me the judge, your father. Because you knew you were going to get a fair trial and he was going to listen. And he had the great talent of most judges all judges should have, is we give judges 2 ears and 1 mouth so that they listen more than they talk. And that way they don't get in trouble. The first thing I'm going to bring up is a subject that Councilor Ferrera has brought to everybody's attention here, and I received stuff on it from people in the courthouse and other people that call me about it, and that is the Court Officers Academy in Western Mass. So my feelings are, from what I've heard, that should be closed immediately because the court system is going to find itself on the back end of a serious lawsuit. From what's been described to me by Joe and others is that the instructors are called DIs. They have campaign hats. I went through 2 basic trainings in my life, and I don't see any need for campaign hats and push-ups and crawling on the ground, being slapped in the face by training to be a court officer. The court officer's job, as I see it, is to be there, help people. If there's a disturbance, know how to quietly contain it, which aren't very much of the time. That doesn't happen an awful lot. But what they're doing out there is, and of course, they're on federal property, so they can't be complained of in a district court, which would cease immediately. When you produce people out of that kind of an academy, you are producing people that are going to be aggressive, physical, and not the kind of people that we want treating the citizens of the Commonwealth when they come in under great pressure sometimes. So I hope you and the other judges, a couple of them sitting here, I know the SJC is aware of it, but I think if you people get on board on this and really talk about it and get something done, being run by the wrong people, in my view. No need of any of that. No need of it. In any event, my other issue is the Harvard report on racism. Have you read it?
I have.
What were your thoughts when you read that?
I found it very troubling. I mean, obviously the primary conclusion, which is that there is racism throughout our legal process here in Massachusetts, is very troubling. And the lack of availability of all of the data that the study authors wanted to have in order to assess it is also troubling.
Yeah, when I read that, how does that happen that agencies said, we're not going to give? I would
don't
think
know.
it would be under an order from the chief judge that you give them whatever we got. Why are we hiding something? We talk about being transparent. Why are these state agencies holding on to this without giving it to the group to do a study?
Well, and the impression I got in addition to that was that in some cases, they weren't collecting the data, which is a separate challenge,
Mhm.
right? So-
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about that, though. I'm skeptical of that. I mean, there's data kept the damn thing in the world. So I hope it's not an excuse of, well, this is the bad stuff, so we're not going to turn it off.
I hope not to.
And as somebody who's going to be a judge and judges that when the government says in a courtroom, leave it to us, judge, we'll turn over the discovery. It's not the way it is. We've learned our lesson, right? Everything gets turned over.
I agree that everything should be
And
turned.
they don't get to decide, the government. That some judge might have to decide a close call or whatever, but they don't get the decision. So hopefully our court system will somehow get to the point where the only answer for what we do is racism. That's what the study said. We have no way to explain this other than racism. So, you'll be a leader in that regard. In the appeals court, you have a lot of sway in what you think and what you say. I got to ask you this because you're going on the appeals court. So the different court than obviously the district court and the superior court, you guys have the ability to change laws or really make a new type of a law, depending on how your rulings you make. So my question to you is your personal thoughts. I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway. On the death penalty, same-sex marriage, and women's right to choose.
Thank you for asking for my personal thoughts. Obviously, the professional answer is that I will follow the law of the Commonwealth, should I be confirmed, because that is
Let me
the
stop
job.
you there. I don't agree with you.
Oh,
You say you're going to follow the law.
How so?
Everybody sits here and says that. But you don't follow the law. You interpret the law.
Fair,
There'll be 3 members on a panel.
yes.
2 vote one way, 1 votes the other. Who's following the law?
I think the goal is to achieve consensus, but if you can't get there, then then that's a good question. I
mean,
think-
we know that when you could be in one courtroom, judge will decide something, the exact same facts in another courtroom, it's a different decision.
True.
So when people come here for the superior and the district, I'm going to follow the law. Well, you're really not. You're going to interpret it. Because if you followed the law, we wouldn't need the appeals court. We wouldn't need the SJC, right?
Right.
You guys up there decide what other judges do, whether it's correct or not. And you interpret it. And sometimes your decision can be overturned too.
That is
So
correct.
that's anyway my comment then. Go ahead.
My personal opinion on those things is that I am personally, I'm not in favor of the death penalty. I am in favor of a woman's right to choose, and I am in favor of the availability of same-sex marriage to people who want.
I would have fallen over if, knowing your background and your family, that you would have any other. There's always an issue about judge shopping in the lower courts. You heard that saying?
I know the saying.
Yeah. What do you think that means?
I think it means what you mentioned earlier, Councillor Jubenville, of asking who is in what session and trying to be sent to the session where the perception is that that judge is more favorably inclined toward your side of the V, whichever side it is.
Right. it comes up a lot when people are, defense lawyers are waiving jury trials and going jury waived, and then the accusation is, oh, he's judge shopping. But I don't agree with it at all, because I know from myself, and Councilor Kennedy knows this too, when we get a trial assignment, usually a month down the road, so we have no idea or the ability to know who is going to be sitting at court. Sometimes you can get a monthly list and take a peek at it, or it's in the Lawyers Weekly, and a certain judge will be assigned to that courthouse. But when you get there, there's no guarantee. Judge might have been sent somewhere else, he might be on vacation, might be sick. So when you jury waive, it's not judge shopping. I mean, to me, judge shopping is going to the clerk's office saying, hey, take my case from this judge and give it to this judge. And I don't know of anybody I haven't heard of anybody doing that. I don't think ever. Because now and then you could get sent out if you asked a clerk, but those days are gone. You can't do this. So with regard to waiving a jury, do you think a defendant has a right to waive the jury?
Well, I understand that a defendant does. That is the practice, right? I mean, in the state system and the federal system, actually, both sides need to agree to waive the jury.
Yeah, we don't
But-
like that. So, so there was a case recently decided by the appeals court. I don't know who was on it. Ebo case. And there was a judge out in Western Mass who had a trial scheduled, jury trial. Defendant came in and he said to the judge, my client wishes to waive the jury.
Yeah.
And I don't know why any lawyer would waive a jury with this particular judge, but he did. He wanted to. And the judge refused. Said, no, here today, it's a jury trial scheduled. I do a jury trial. So the lawyer argued the rule. He said, no, you have to convince me beyond a preponderance of the evidence as to why you want to waive the jury. And according to the decision that I remember, they went to sidebar. He showed the judge the rule, which clearly said he didn't do any of that. The judge said, no, you're going to have to. So they had a jury, and he appealed it, and it appeals. And they said, no, the defendant has a right to waive that jury up until the time of impanelment. Or if there's co-defendants and they don't all agree. There was one other reason why I couldn't waive it. There was 3 different reasons as why a judge stated it's not proper. So that jury waived issue seems to be getting a lot of bad press. The Globe has run articles on judges who find a lot of people not guilty. And usually those are jury waive cases. And I know myself, and I know Councilor Kennedy the same way. You look at a set of facts in a case, you can tell if it's. So rather than waste the time on a jury, you go jury waive because it is a weak government.
Sure.
But there are judges who will not allow defendants to do that. I was in, we lost a year and a half, so it was before that. And two instances, lawyers wanted to waive in front of a judge. They said, no, gotta have three times. So I think the Gibo case solved that issue. What else do I have to complain about it? I guess that's it. Again, I think you're tremendously qualified, and I want to say to you that if you become half the judge your father was, you'll be a wonderful judge.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Before I call on I think I don't know where, I think I'm going to have someone on Zoom too. Before I call on the next counselor, I just want to say that it's very clear about this egregious action of these court officers, and it has been discussed, and nominee has got the message, and I think we should be going on questioning about this nominee going on to the appeals court. The other thing I'd like to mention is, and it's your decision, you do not have to wear your mask in this room, but if you feel you're vulnerable or whatever, it's your decision. So thank you. Counselor, yeah, we do see her now. Okay, she's gone. All right. Joe.
Thank you.
Counselor. Okay, hold on a minute. I already called, you disappeared, so I called on Counselor Ferrara.
I would defer to Council Hurley. If you want to go first, that's fine with me.
Oh, that's good. All right,
You bet.
Counselor Hurley, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to see you in person,
Thank you. You too.
Attorney Hershfang. We spoke at some length. And initially, I had reservations because you really didn't have much experience in state courts. And I admire you for your stick-to-itiveness
Thank you.
and for giving me a valid reason to consider you as a good candidate for the appeals court. I have one question. When I was reading your application, on page 8, question 44, says Superior Court, 5%. District Court, 90%. And then the Juvenile Court, 5%. So, based on, we're talking about district court and state courts. Is that 90% meant to be federal court?
No, sorry if that wasn't clear. When I spent 6 months as a special assistant district attorney in Cambridge District Court, I spent the majority of that time actually in state district court in Cambridge and Air and a few other places in the county. And then I did do just a really token amount of time appearing in juvenile court. So that is state district court.
Okay, but in essence, it was 90% of 6 months.
Right. And I think the way it was asked, I hope it was clear that it was of my state experience, but then overall, I think I said that my state experience was a very small percentage of my overall experience.
All right. And you applied several times for the U.S. District Court and weren't successful.
That is true.
So then you applied for the Supreme Court in 2016 and then the appeals court now.
That's correct.
And what made you change your mind as far as federal versus state?
I really changed my mind with respect to the kind of judge I wanted to be more than federal versus state. Coming out of a trial practice, I had originally thought that I would like to serve as a trial court judge. And so my first applications were in that vein. And as you point out, they were in the federal system, which is a system with which I was much more familiar. The more I practiced and sort of the more I reflected on what I like about practicing law, the more I realized that I really enjoy the back and forth of working with other lawyers to get to the right result. And that experience is really an appellate court experience and not a trial court experience. Trial court judges are, fantastic people with a wonderful job, but I realized that I was really more inclined toward an appellate position. And so that realization is what you see reflected in my later applications.
So you weren't just talking about me when you said trial court judges in state court are fantastic?
Well, the ones I've met, I can't say I've met everybody, but I really have been so impressed with the level of care and professionalism I've seen in the trial courts through my career.
And in the SEC, you prosecuted criminal cases, correct?
No, they're actually, the SEC has only civil jurisdiction. So sometimes there will be a parallel criminal case brought by a U.S. attorney's office, but we do only civil.
All right, so then I was going to ask you if you thought Martha Stewart got a fair sentence.
I can't say I'm a huge fan.
What was it?
Well, I have friends who are huge fans of hers, and they thought she got done dirty. That it was much too severe a sentence because of who she was.
I think that probably is true.
Yeah. So, basically, I read your application, had a really good talk. And,
Thank you.
I will be voting in person for you.
Thank you very much, Counselor Hurley. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Counselor. And as I will repeat, we've already given the message to this nominee, and we will just be covering what affects you on going on to the
Could I ask a question?
appeals court.
Are you saying certain counselors can't ask certain things?
No, I didn't say that. I said that, I think it's very important that you gave the message, Counselor, to the nominee about what's the egregious matter that's happening with those court officers. It's outrageous. But I'm just saying, I'm not directing you in any way. I'm just saying that she got the message, she said yes. And I'm just wondering, I'm just saying that I hope that we can talk about this nominee, what we.
The message is being sent not only for this body, but for everybody watching on TV.
Yes, yes.
Or whatever they're watching. And I think counselors can ask whatever they want as many times.
I didn't say they couldn't. I said that I would hope that we would ask questions that, directly to this nominee so that the public will know how she's qualified for this position. And that's what a hearing is about. I've never directed in 21 years anyone what to say and not what to say. That's all. That's all. For the public's sake, I just want to hear from this nominee and the council's ask every question that's directed. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I intend to ask every question that I intended to ask, and I'm not going to be
No, I'm not.
persuaded not to ask any question because.
I'm just asking you put your cell phones away, and I didn't get that
Thank you.
privilege.
So, let me say thank you for your service.
Thank you.
As someone who spent 30 years in law enforcement, 9 years as a police chief, and someone who dealt with the AUSA's office from time to time, I appreciate everything you did. I believe, if I'm not wrong, that you prosecuted a fairly large case down in the Somerset Fall River area.
I did.
And I heard all great things about you throughout
Thank you.
throughout the process, and I will never forget that. There are a lot of things going on, and I do take near and dear what happened at the Trial Court Officer Academy. I was the one that initially brought it up. I am the one that's going to keep talking about it until something's done about it. It's a discussion that needs to happen. My phone has been blowing up. My emails have been blowing up. It's not a job I wanted or was looking for, but it's a job that I'm not going to walk away from because of the atrocities that have happened at the trial court. Today, I met with Nancy McGilvery. I missed the first hearing basically because I set an appointment with Ms. McGilvery and her team long before this morning's hearing was scheduled. But I want to read to you something and see if get your thoughts on it, because your thoughts are important to me. So this is something that went out to the trial court dated July 23rd. And it says, on May 14th, 2021, I announced that an independent investigation and assessment would be conducted of the Court Officer Training Academy into response to allegations that new officers have been subjected to assaultive, demeaning, and hazing behavior. Since that time, the trial court has engaged in a procurement process to select an entity to conduct this assessment. This process has concluded, and a group consisting of Nancy McGilvery, Kevin Burke, and Ellen Graydon has been chosen. Ms. McGilvery is a former U.S. Marshal for the District of Massachusetts and a career law enforcement officer with the U.S. Marshal Service, having experience in court security and both attending and teaching in an academy environment. Mr. Burke is a former district attorney for Essex County and a former secretary of public safety and security. In these roles, Mr. Burke was a court user and stakeholder, as well as a previously having responsibility for the oversight of public safety training administered by the Massachusetts State Police Training Committee and State Police. Ms. Graydon, as a former assistant district attorney and chief of the appellate division in Essex County, brings with her requisite analytical skills, legal expertise, and insights as a court user and stakeholder. I strongly encourage the participation and cooperation in this investigation by any member of the security department who believes they have information to contribute without retaliation or retribution. Members of this department who desire to provide information may do so confidentially by directing and contacting the investigators at Nancy McGilvery, that's NANCYMCGILLIVRA 18@gmail.com. So I'm pleased to tell you that this morning I met with Miss McGilvery. I met with another gentleman who's a retired Boston police officer who works for her firm. I was very impressed. I spent over 2 hours with them. I think they're a very capable firm. Miss McGilvery and Mr. Burke did the state police investigation. I think they did a great job, and no one's saying that they favored anyone. They called it as they saw it, and I have full confidence that they will do the same here. What are your thoughts about the security director sending out this memo?
Well, of the three people you mentioned, Nancy McGilvery is the only one that I have had any contact with in my career, and I always found her to be honorable and law-abiding and careful, and that sounds to me like an appropriate choice. I don't know the other two people you mentioned from the memo. It sounds like they are highly qualified, but that's all I know about them.
That's great to hear. I know you did mostly the federal things, and I know Ms. McGilvery had the pleasure of serving as the U.S. Marshal. She also taught at training academies, and I think she's eminently qualified to do this investigation. Do you have any thoughts about the fact that the security director himself, Mr. Morrow, who oversaw all this behavior, is part of sending out the memo, choosing the investigator? And like I said, I think the investigators are great, but I'm asking you, do you think it was appropriate that Mr. Morrow would have a role in that?
I don't know enough about who else had a role to answer that question with confidence. I can say that if he alone had been in charge, that would certainly strike me as potentially troubling. One never knows, hiring an outside investigator, whether that person feels beholden to the person who hired her or not. And so I agree that is a valid concern in a situation like this.
Would you have a concern if I told you that the director of the academy had their spouse go through the academy the first time they were director of the academy? Would that concern you at all?
Just from the information you gave me, it sounds troubling. I don't know what other, I mean, if the spouse had already applied and been approved before that person became the director, maybe that would be a factor that would change my mind. But based on what you said, yes.
Do you have any concerns over the fact that the Massachusetts trial court chooses to have their court officer academy in Chicopee, Massachusetts, on a federal air base where the recruits can't leave for Monday through Friday? They have to sleep there, and they're on a federal air base. Do you think that has a chilling effect on people having redress in a Massachusetts trial court?
You mean from a jurisdictional perspective?
Yeah, jurisdictional, who has investigative, opportunities to do the state police? Are they allowed there? I can tell you, I spoke to high-ranking members of the state police who don't think they have jurisdiction. I know that a lot of the cadets have gone for medical treatment because of the way they were pepper sprayed and hazed and treated. Good percent of the class goes for treatment after. And how does one access those records on a federal Air Force base? Do you find that troubling?
Yes.
Do you agree that there should be that once this investigation is done, it should be made open to the public?
That sounds appropriate.
As an AUSA did you have any interaction with US 1983 cases where someone acting of the color of law deprived somebody of their rights?
No, those were civil cases, and I was a criminal AUSA, but as the clerk to a federal trial court judge, I did have the opportunity to work on, I think, 2 Section 1983 cases.
You did work on 1983 cases?
I did, yeah.
Do you think, given a scenario of a candidate in a police, in a court officer academy, let's suppose that we have, they have a witness or witnesses that say that the drill instructor slapped them across the face. Do you think that could rise to the level of a criminal charge?
A state criminal charge or?
State or federal?
I mean, if someone slaps you, that's assault and battery, right? So I would think so.
And what about a 1983 action?
I am sorry to say, I don't remember the details of a 1983 claim. I know it's a claim against someone acting under color of state law. I don't remember all of the elements.
Depriving someone of their rights, like if a police officer acts as an unlawful search,
Mhm.
a Fourth Amendment search, you were familiar with those as somebody who did OCDEF cases, right?
The lawful ones, but yes.
The lawful ones. Those guys are in jail now. But if somebody violates or deprives someone of a federal right or a constitutional right, that gives rise to a 1983 action, correct?
That's correct.
What type of 1983 actions were you involved with?
It's been a long time. I remember, I really only remember one of them at all, and that one only vaguely, and it was prison related. It was a prisoner in a facility, it must have been a state facility because it was a 1983 claim, who I think brought a pro se claim about something that had happened to him during his term.
And my understanding is, as a OCDEF lawyer, you tried many, probably mostly high-profile cases in the federal court.
I don't know that they were high profile. No one ever came, but they were big money or big drug quantity cases usually. Yes.
I think you're exceptional. I think you're brilliant.
Thank you.
I know the person you're taking the spot of. Justice Wenlett called me, and she had great things to say. So I am impressed that you applied and want to do the job. As Councilor Duff said, I think you could make a couple more dollars somewhere else. So God bless you for wanting to do this, and you certainly have my support next week.
Thank you, Counselor. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you,
Counselor
Counselor.
Ferrara.
Your questioning was very appropriate in referring those questions to this nominee. I'm sorry that my comment was misinterpreted, and I think that all the questions were directed rightfully. So first of all, I want to congratulate you on
Thank you.
being nominated. And I want to thank you for all the time that you afforded me. I really,
Thank you.
really appreciate that time. And I'm going to start off with not the usual, but I'm going to ask you, this is actually a case that went before the appeals court. And I want to know what your decision would be. And this is it. There was a man walking 2 dogs. One was on a leash and one was not. The German Shepherd was not on the leash. Now, there was a woman with a small dog on her lawn when this man came by with the dogs. The German Shepherd rushed on that lawn and literally tore apart this little dog. Now, thankfully, the dog survived, had surgery. The cost of that surgery was $4,000. When she went to court to sue for the $4,000, the judge ruled the dog was property. Do you think a pet is property?
I was fortunate enough to grow up with many beloved pets, and they were members of the family. So the idea that your pet is like your car or something, no, I don't agree with that.
Well, thank you, Judge Blake, and I didn't get this from you, and I'm sure that you voted the right way. And yes, she received the $4,000 to pay for the surgery. So thank you. So first of all, you have applied a number of times. So you did get through one time and were rejected, and that was only, but 2000, I'm all alone here. Isn't this awful?
You're
But
not
anyway,
alone. I'm here.
2008, no, that's not the way it should be. But 2018, you were, you applied,
I did.
and you applied to the appeals court this time. Tell me what happened.
Well, I made it through most of the process, and I understood that I was interviewed by the governor's chief legal counsel, and I understood that I was one of a number of people who might be eligible for the next 18 months to be nominated, but I was not nominated. Others were nominated, and then my 18 months ran out, as it does, and another spot came up really within days, I think, of my 18 months running out, and I wanted to serve, so I applied again.
So how many members of the 21 lawyers who have the awesome responsibility to decide who gets an interview and who gets chosen to be recommended to the governor? I don't have that authority. I only have one person. I don't know who else was interviewed. That's an awesome responsibility. And guess what? In this administration, the chair of the JNC has never had 21 people there. They vote, they don't see the person, they don't talk to the person. And I'm saying it to the public, out to the public, not to you. It's wrong. And years ago, there was a JNC chair, and he sat down those 21 lawyers who had that awesome responsibility, and he said to them, if you don't go to the hearing, you don't vote on the nominee. That's justice. How many interviewed you of the 21?
It was not all 21 of them.
No, there never has been in the 7 years.
It was, I mean, we sat around a long conference table. It was probably 10 or 12 people.
Yeah. How wrong is that? I don't, people think we have so much authority, governors, councils. We don't. We don't. So I just want to put that forward. It doesn't change anything, but it's nice to vent. So anyway, okay, so now there's a difference between the federal and the state. Tell me what you saw that was different, and how did you apply your knowledge of law?
Sure. Well, the federal system is a separate set of laws, obviously, both the actual substantive law that says, this is a crime or this is a wrong act, and also the procedure, how you go about trying your case, what the evidence rules are. Those are all separate from the state. Having said that, the procedural laws and a lot of the substantive law are very similar. So if you've tried a lot of cases in federal court, you have the toolbox you need to go try a case in state court. Sure, you'll have to learn a few more things. You'll have to look things up along the way, but I do that in federal cases as well. And with respect to the actual substantive laws, criminal law tends to have certain similarities state to federal. The actual number and section of the statute will be different. The words will be different, but taking something I know, for example, the federal law makes it a crime to have a quantity of drugs that you would have if you were going to sell it. Similarly, on the state side, there's a crime of possession with intent to distribute. And then there are thresholds, at least this much, but no more than this much. That is similar from system to
Well,
system.
it seems to me, in looking at your background, it seems like the United States court, in your position, you went after big companies and agencies that we don't see someone in your seat coming from the Massachusetts court that has that experience. So I think that's a great advantage. Now, I'm going to talk to you, and you have great writing, and writing ability is so important, and for me, it's easy to read and I understand it.
Thank you.
And I don't always see that in JNC reports, but you made it very clear. Let me talk about some of those things. Let's talk about Louis Dela Cruz. And he was selling drugs,
He was.
and then a friend died of an overdose. So why don't you tell the rest of the story to the public?
Sure. That is a case I did when I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I think the trial was in, shoot, I'm going to get the date wrong. It was a 2001 case, but we didn't try it for a number of years. And the prosecution alleged that Mr. De La Cruz had sold drugs to one of his customers, who sold it to one of her customers, who either gave or sold it to a friend of his, a young man. He was a 21-year-old young man, only son of a single mother, who took the heroin and died of an overdose. And so we charged Mr. De La Cruz with distribution of drugs resulting in an overdose death. And that was a very painful case because of the victim and his mother, who was an incredibly strong and loving mother who had lost her only son.
Yeah. So that's the Lynn Bias law, isn't it?
That's right. Yes.
And you know what I'm reminded? I'm reminded of Carol O'Connor, Archie Bunker,
Mhm.
and his son died of an overdose. And he investigated and he found the drug dealer, and he was sentenced for the murder, actually, of his son. Now, recently we had, 2 years ago, we had a Massachusetts judge who, when you read about that, he had a drug dealer that was very known to the police, and they were trying to get him, big dealer. And I heard the transcript, and he said to this man, this criminal, "You are not a citizen. If you were, I'd put you in prison, but you're not, and you're providing for your family." And he gave him 2 years probation. There's no words. I have 2 friends that lost sons overdose of heroin. And I thought, if this was the drug dealer, would they be able to say to these mothers, my friends, one was an only child, to say he was providing for his family? So, all judges aren't equal. And I'm really, really concerned about that. And, drugs, they're not going to go away. And we've lost the war on drugs. And here, I think, and I haven't checked it, but I remember we only had about 1.5% of the budget here, Massachusetts budget, for the judicial. And so we don't have drug placements to put these people. And I know these boys tried, but they're only short term. And I know the mothers went to classes. So I'm just saying, they don't want to go to Concord. They don't want to go to a prison. And I think there's only one for women. So, I don't know. I don't know where we're going to get the message out there that we need drug treatment centers that last. And I've gone to drug course. I've gone to drug graduation. And it's really wonderful to see these people, all ages, in to testify in front of everybody, and they to graduation, and they made it, and they did it, and they hugged the judge. It was wonderful. So, so I said to the last nominee, I hope you'll join with some other judges and lobby these legislators. I'm not getting anywhere. So we need you, because you're the one that they come before. So anyway, you know what I couldn't get out of my mind one of your cases, a lot of them, but this particular case, this man hired someone to kill his wife and infant daughter. I mean, this is the society. It's even women killing their children and drowning them and everything. I don't even want to see the news. So, so tell me about that and tell us how that went and how it resulted.
Sure. In that case, I actually joined that case shortly before trial, because the defendant was in jail awaiting trial, and he had been charged with a domestic assault for harming his wife. And while he was in jail, he was thinking about the case against him, and apparently he realized that if his wife was not available to testify against him, the case against him would not be strong or might even go away altogether. And so he approached a fellow inmate, someone else who was being held, about hiring a hitman. Unbeknownst to the defendant, the fellow inmate was someone who went to his own lawyer and said, look, I've been approached about this. I would like to cooperate with the authorities, and maybe I could, get a break if I do that. And so the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms became involved, and an undercover agent was introduced as a so-called hitman to the defendant, and recorded on a body camera the conversations in prison with this man about how he wanted to have his wife and his daughter killed. And so we brought that case, and I was on the trial team. I was the second chair. It was not my case. And I think we put on a very strong case, and the defendant was convicted, and his wife was fine, but she was a lovely person. She was a pediatrician. And one of the things that the agents did in the course of the case was actually have her pose in the woods as if she had been killed. And then those pictures were shown to the defendant.
Like a movie.
It
really is.
It was. It's usually not that
Yeah,
exciting. but-
what bothers me is that a lot of these mothers are an accomplice and they walk free. And that bothers me. Baby Bella in a bag, and that mother saw him beat that child to death and said, oh, she's with the grandmother, whatever. So anyway, you've had a lot of fraud cases that I think are very unique, because I've been here 21 years, and I'm saying that comes from the federal. We don't hear those. I'm telling you, we don't. And tell me about Guillermo Vasco, and wasn't he the one that was involved with the drugs?
No, so Mr. Vasco was the defendant I was just talking about. He was the murderer.
All right,
for
I'm
hire.
sorry.
That's
So
okay.
that was, all right, so an investigation of prescription drugs being falsely advertised, Bertus, okay?
Yeah.
So tell us about that, including the fraud, market manipulation, and cherry picking. I don't know what that means, so educate the public what all of that means and what those terms refer to.
Sure. So you've brought in a lot of terms from my current life. I guess I'll just pick up on one, if that's okay for now, which is actually the case that Dan Tai talked about, which is a drug approval case. And so one of the things that we do at the SEC is, I guess I should say, one of the ways that the SEC tries to police the investment market is to make sure that everybody who goes to invest and is looking at public information has the same information and has accurate information. And as I'm sure you followed the approval process for the coronavirus vaccines, for example, and you will know that there are these phases that the Food and Drug Administration makes companies go through to test whether their drugs are safe and effective. And the case, the more recent case that I had with Dan Tai had to do with that approval process and with public statements that had been made by the company about how their drug was coming along through that process. And so what the SEC alleged was that the company knew that the FDA process was actually not going that great, but that when they went to talk to the investing public, they withheld some of that information that they had while they were putting out other parts of the information in a way that we alleged was misleading, so that investors were not really playing with a full deck when they went.
That's really, that's really scary for the public because, to know some of these prescription drugs are not really acceptable and, and could harm people. It's just something. So what about the fraud, all the manipulation? You've had a lot of cases on that, and tell us what cherry picking means.
Sure. Well, cherry picking, the phrase obviously is, I'm going to take this piece and this piece and this piece and leave the rest. In the investing context, it refers to when someone who has authority over other people's investments, an investment advisor, will make a bunch of purchases of different investments in a day. So just hypothetically, I'm going to buy this soda stock and this telecommunications stock, and then at the end of the day, this one went up, but this one went down. And then they take the ones that went up in the course of the day and they give it to themselves or their family or some favored account. And all the ones that went down, they'll assign to somebody else. And there are obviously a few things wrong with that. But one of them is that when you are in that position, when you're an investment advisor and you have the trust to manage someone else's money, under the securities laws, it's very clear that you have a fiduciary obligation. So you need to put that client's interest first. That needs to be at the top of your list every single time in every decision you make. And so if you are looking at some clients and saying, I'll give you the winners, and other clients and saying, I'll give you the losers, that's not lawful under the securities law. So that's what the cherry picking cases are about.
Telecommunication Act, how involved have you been with that one?
I'm not very. I had a telecommunications case 100 years ago when I was
It
at the
was
law.
mentioned.
Yeah.
Just briefly, I have a problem with it because no community can refuse to have an antenna or any one of these, one of the other
Towers.
mechanical things that they have. You can't refuse them. And they say you can cite them. But I come from 4 square miles. And so they're over a nursing home or they're in a neighborhood and you can't. And there's no way that we can prove it doesn't have a health hazard. And you can't go to the zoning board because it's not a zoning issue. You can't go to the health. And so, and they're very creative. They make them look like trees and everything else. But okay, enough of that, that was a long time ago. Okay, talking about the cocaine and marijuana transportation operation, that was a big one. Michael Griffin, am I correct? Okay.
That's correct. Yes. So that was actually my last trial at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the jury hung. But that case came to us actually from another district. It was indicted in the Eastern District of Virginia and then transferred up here at the defendant's request because they argued they shouldn't have to go try a case in Virginia because Massachusetts was more convenient for them, and the judge in Virginia sent it up here. So we were not involved at all in the investigation of that case, which is unusual when you're in the U.S. Attorney's Office. But it came to us, and I worked with a couple of police officers from Virginia and a state police task force to figure out, how we could try that case. And we tried it, didn't win the first time, but the second time around, my former colleague prevailed.
It was really an eye-opener to see all the cases you had, how much fraud and dishonesty it is, even from prescription drugs, inside trading. Donovan, whatever happened to him for what he did?
Well, that was a SEC case, and as I mentioned before, we have only civil jurisdiction. So he had to pay a fine, which is called a penalty, and disgorgement, which is a word for giving up the money that you got that you shouldn't have gotten. And I think that was it for him. Maybe Dan remembers better. He's still here, but I don't remember whether the other thing that sometimes happens in SEC cases is that you're barred from the industry, but I don't remember whether he was barred or not. You have to be in a certain, it has to be a bar from acting in certain capacities, and I can't.
So these cases take quite a long time, don't
They
they?
do. They do, yeah.
What's the average time, would you say?
You know, it really depends. Sometimes if a case comes in the door, sometimes we get it charged within a few months, but sometimes it's, a couple years of investigating before we get it charged. And then the pace of the case in the court process also varies.
What's the other name? Keefe comes into my mind.
Diane Keefe.
Tell us about that case.
So that was the first hearing I did at the SEC. So it wasn't a federal court trial. It was in front of an administrative law judge at the SEC. There's just a judge, it's no jury, but you call witnesses. And Ms. Keefe was a portfolio manager at a fund company up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And at the SEC, one of the things that the SEC does to try to police the markets is we have a division that goes out to money managers and checks to see if they're following the rules. And so that group had gone out and asked at this fund family, they asked for notes from meetings that had happened, that were supposed to have happened. And there were no notes, but Ms. Keefe thought that there probably should have been notes. And so she made some up and gave them to the SEC. And we sued her for that because it was our position that either there are notes or there are not notes, but you certainly shouldn't make some up to give it to the SEC. And we prevailed on that. The judge found that she had violated the law.
So what would you say about your experience in the federal court? What contribution do you think you bring with that experience coming to a Massachusetts court and to the land court?
So
I'm sorry, to the appeals court.
that's okay. A couple of things I think.
Long day.
I know what I don't know, as someone, I think Justice Blake said earlier, and I will definitely take that to heart and work hard to learn the substantive areas of the law that I'm not familiar with. What I do bring is a willingness to learn, an ability to learn quickly. It's certainly not the first job change that kind of has my head spinning. I've gone from one job to a different job to a different job already. And I look forward to the opportunity, if I'm confirmed, to do that again. I bring my writing ability. I work very hard at my writing. I believe that it ought to be clear and understandable. That is something the appeals court values. And my ability to work with others.
That's great. Do you see these cases that you had? These are big cases taking on this fraud, and it's really frightening what's going on out there, and I'm ignorant of it. How do you see these kind of cases in Massachusetts and they're not being addressed?
Well, I think we always have work to do at the SEC. And so there is always fraud going on. And it's here, it's everywhere. I would like to hope that we catch the biggest ones, but that's not always true. And then obviously on the state side, the Secretary of State has a division, the State Securities Division works on the state side going after similar cases. So you never know what you haven't found, but I know that together they and we work hard to try to root them out.
Well, I think there should be diversity on the appeals court, and I think Judge Green is a perfect example coming from the land court. that each one of you are bringing your expertise, your experience to the appeals court, and I think that's so important. I feel there's almost a bias against putting people on the bench in Massachusetts who have come from the federal. And I want Massachusetts judges. But when you have someone that's been on the federal court and has some Massachusetts experience, I think that's a great merging to be appointed to something like the appeals court. And I'm just sorry that I'm the only counsel sitting in this chamber, because I really want the council to hear this and to hear your experience and to give you that opportunity. What would you say in a nutshell? I love your writing. And what would you say about the writing that you gave us? It was thorough, and for someone that from nowhere, I understood what you were saying. You want to tell us about that in a nutshell? That you chose that. You chose that to go to the JNC for them to assess.
Thank you. I liked that brief. I thought it was pretty short and to the point, and I had a little bit of fun with it, which is something I like to do with my writing, mostly in a footnote. And so I think those are the qualities of good writing. You should say what you need to say and then stop. And if you can make it engaging along the way, even better.
Do you want to tell the public what it was?
It was
I know, I read it.
Sure. It was a brief I filed a number of years ago, actually in a case that Eric Forney and I did together, having to do with jurisdiction. So the defendants in that case were all Chinese nationals living in China, and their lawyers who were in New York didn't want to travel to Massachusetts to go to court. So they filed a motion to have the case moved to New York. And it was an interesting legal issue, because usually in these cases, the defendant will argue, well, you know, all my witnesses are in New York and I live in New York. And none of that was true, because none of these people lived in the country. And so it was, from a legal perspective, it was a very interesting challenge, and one that I think will come up and is coming up more and more as we are increasingly multinational in our business dealings. But I argued that, you know, I think we jokingly in the office called it the subway case. You know, who gets to take the subway to court? Is it us or is it them? And the judge decided that.
Case, or am I dreaming that there's someone in a subway?
I don't think I had a
Yeah,
subway
okay,
case.
all right, no, then that couldn't be it, okay. But I just want to tell you, we gave your mother the governor's seat, so I want to put that on the record.
Thank you. She looks great in it.
But this was such a pleasure. It was such a pleasure. Almost 4 hours. We closed the diner, and I just it's just so good to see someone so qualified. You have the age, you have the qualifications, you have the and you know, I look for age because I want life experience, you know, and that's what you're bringing. You're not going to be there 30 years. And I think that it's important, you know, to see everyone. You have come before us. We don't see people from the federal court. I'm here 21 years. I've seen a couple, but I really think they should really be fair. If someone has served both, don't disqualify them because they were in the federal court. I think there's a lot of experience that you bring that not only will you learn from the members, these wonderful judges on the appeals court, but you'll be able to, in turn, teach them, inform them of some of the cases you've had. And I think that's great. It's been a pleasure to chair this hearing.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, you know, but, you know, I live by the serenity prayer.
Thank you,
Accept the things I
Counselor.
can't change. So I will be very pleased. Now, I have got notice. See, we meet at a public, for the public, we meet at a public assembly on Wednesdays, you know, after or before a hearing. So I've got word that we're not having a public assembly next week. So that will mean I will not present your name until the next week. And I'd be very proud to make that nomination and to vote for you. And thank you for applying. and keep going, you know what I mean? Because I'll tell you, honestly, and people know me, I'm not politically correct. A lot of political nominees jump the line. And that's why I urge people to keep applying. And you did, you persevered, and you made it deservingly.
Thank you so
So
much.
I thank you all for coming, and I'm going to adjourn this hearing. And again, thank you all for coming. It was really, this was my pleasure.
Thank you for your support.